The next one would be elastic supply. Elastic supply, if you draw the diagram, this would be price, the origin, the quantity supplied. It will be something similar to this one. So meaning when the price, there is a small change in price, say P2, I'll extend this. We have Q1 and Q2. When there is a small change in price, there is much larger change in quantity supplied. The quantity supplied is more responsive to the change in prices. So the price elasticity of supply would be always greater than 1. So if there is 1% change in the price, there will be more than 1% change in quantity supplied. This relates to a lot of goods that we see in the market. So when there is a small price increase, the companies would be inclined to produce more of the goods and so to increase their profits. The final one would be perfectly elastic supply. Perfectly elastic supply by definition means that any decrease in the product price would immediately cause the supply to shift to zero. So to graphically explain this, this would be price, quantity supplied, the origin of zero. It will be a horizontal line. This is P1. So if there is a small price decrease, the quantity supplied by firms would come to zero. So the price elasticity of supply for this one, when there's a small change in price, there is an infinitely big change in quantity supplied. So it will be infinity. So in real life, it is difficult to find or almost impossible to find perfectly elastic supply, but we can argue that perfectly competitive labor market can be one of those examples. For example, when the industry has set a wage rate, a market wage, and for a single firm, this would be the supply curve. So if you look at, for example, the demand is D1 here, the quantity supplied would be Q1 is this point for this price point. So the labor supply has perfectly elastic curve. If the wage rate of a single firm changes, the supply would have an infinite amount of change. So suppose the wage rate is increasing in comparison to the market wage, then a large labor force would hope to find work in that particular company. So even there's a small change in the wage rate, there will be many people coming to this firm, and the supply is so to be perfectly elastic. A real life example would be for this kind of perfectly elastic would be a labor market for fast food chain restaurants. All fast food restaurants hire, and they normally give minimum wage. So each individual restaurants would be facing a perfectly elastic labor supply curve. If one restaurant decides to hire below the minimum wage, probably nobody is going to apply for a job there. But if instead it hires above the minimum rate, there would be a huge influx of people trying to work for them, given the skills required by that restaurant is the same, and is same to compare to the skills required by other fast food restaurants. So this is one example, but generally it is impossible to find perfectly elastic supply, because even there is a minuscule change in price, there won't be an infinitely big change in quantity supplied. So to sum it up, let's write the price elasticity of supply for each of these different types. For perfectly inelastic supply, it will be zero. There will be no change whatsoever in quantity supplied for the change in price. And for inelastic supply, it will be less than 1. So it will be less than 1. Price elasticity of supply would be less than 1, meaning it is unresponsive to the change in price. For unitary of elastic supply, it will be exactly 1. There will be a corresponding change in the exact amount from price to quantity supplied. For elastic supply, it will be greater than 1. So meaning that when there's a small change in price, there is a bigger change in quantity supplied. For perfectly elastic supply, it is actually infinity, because even there is a small change in price, there is an infinitely big change in quantity supplied. So as you can see, it will vary from 0 to infinity, but it will never take a negative coefficient. So that is an important point to note.